Kim, Elizabeth Proust unleashed quite a lot of criticism of the government with her comments a few weeks ago, and where she was talking about the state being strangled by a lack of decision making about infrastructure. So have those comments galvanised you guys into action yet?
No, I mean, and the comments that she made was unfair, and originally they were talking about previous times. But the issue for us is that when we came into government, we needed to deal with a number of cost overruns and cost blowouts. We had to deal with them. Melbourne markets and Mikey's, and these things ran into almost billions of dollars. So we had to sort out those sorts of issues. The other thing is that we had to rebuild the budget to get into a situation where we were generating surpluses. And by building those surpluses means that when we are building infrastructure over the forward estimates period, we're not relying on debt, we're actually using our cash surpluses to be able to build infrastructure. And the other point we're making is that we are building the regional rail, which is the largest transport project, I think, in the country, which is a multi-billion-dollar project, building the Bendigo Hospital, building the Cancer Centre. So we have lots and lots of infrastructure activity going on at the moment, and we're spending in this year a record amount of about $6.2, $6.3 billion worth of infrastructure spend, which in tough economic times is credible.
I guess implicit in Elizabeth Proust's criticism is that the business community, and this is not just her but others as well, the business community isn't that interested in you guys running $100 million surpluses every year, that actually there is a case sometimes to run a deficit, and maybe this is one of those times when we're so in need of infrastructure.
No, but that's my point. I mean, we believe there's one of the strong pillars that we run is that we must have strong finances and we must live within our own means. And by protecting the AAA credit rating and by building up those surpluses means that we're not going to continually go into debt. And we must have that situation over the forward estimates period. And I mean, and you have some sectors of the business community that are saying we should cut taxes but in the same breath increase expenditure, which just doesn't make any sense. We believe that we have to live within our means, and that's what we're doing. And if we were to run close to putting our AAA credit rating into some sort of concern, then I'm sure the business community would be out there saying, what are you doing? Victoria relies on strong economies, and that's what the Baillieu government needs to aim for.
Kim, and this is a problem faced, I think, by all states. And do you think that a large amount of infrastructure from now on, particularly roads and even rail, will have to be financed in some form of toll arrangement where the user actually pays for the facility? Yeah,
look, I believe in the user pay principle as best we can. We are strong supporters of the PPPs. We have a world reputation. When you do go to Europe and speak to the French and the English, they understand that we do have a good, transparent record on PPPs. So when we are building those future infrastructures, we are looking to the PPPs because we believe that they are the most efficient model. And when it comes to other infrastructure, we obviously need to look at the issue of tolling.
Kim, there's been a lot of talk about the two-speed economy, and I suppose Victoria's a manufacturing state, so on the slower speed. How's that shaping, how do you characterise the Victorian economy today, and how's it shaping the fiscal strategy?
Yeah, and that's a good question. I guess the interesting point is that when WA and Queensland do well in the mines, so does Victoria. And we have the situation where Newcrest, BHP and Rio actually have their head offices here in Melbourne. So that means a lot of that back office support, the accounting, the legal, the superannuation, the insurance work is being done here. And when you look at professional services, that's actually overtaken manufacturing in this state. And we've obviously had a strong manufacturing base, but professional services, particularly for those head office and in the mining sector, is doing extremely well for us. So yes, we acknowledge the two-speed economy. We do not have the natural wealth, but by having efficiencies and providing that skilled labour into those mining companies and into WA and Queensland is a very, very important part of our economy.
Yeah, you posted a deficit in the first half of $341 million. How much will you have to find for the budget in May to make a surplus in the budget of $100 million?
Well, in that mid-year report that you're referring to, it did say that we're on track to deliver a surplus at the end of this year of $147 million. We have a target of, as you mentioned earlier, of the $100 million surplus. We are driving greater efficiencies, greater savings to be able to achieve those targets. But it is about providing, when we're talking about productivity, it is about providing an efficient public service. And when business are doing business with Victorian government, we want it to be at a lower cost and it needs to be efficient. And when you're looking at attracting companies in from India or China, we need to give them the assurance that when they are doing business with the government, that it's at an efficient cost. We don't want to be bogging these companies down with red tape and bureaucracy. We want to be able to get on with the job.
In health, which has been a major Victorian industry, there is the most magnificent opportunity to substantially reduce the costs of hospital care and to increase patient services by using instruments like the iPad to cut paperwork. My reading of your agreement with the nurses is that we've absolutely obliterated that opportunity, which is a tragedy for Australia.
Well, with the nurses agreement, and the details will be released when the time's appropriate, but we have a wages policy of 2.5% plus productivity trade-off, which we have stuck to with the police and the nurses and the auxiliary workers in the health sector. We believe that we have a good deal with the nurses, and we are attempting in all of those wage negotiations to continue to drive efficiencies and to get those productivity offsets, which are important. At the end of the day, we need to be in a position where we're going to settle, and we believe that we have settled with the nurses, and we get the best efficiency gains that we possibly can as part of that negotiation.
It's not what the nurses are saying. They're saying that they've got fixed ratios of patients and nurses, which is a disastrous concession because with iPads you can slash the paperwork and you don't need as many nurses to improve care. I think you've absolutely stuffed it.
I think that when the details come out of the nurses' negotiations, I think that people will see that it's fair. And we've said all along we want it to be fair to the nurses, fair to the Victorian taxpayer, and I believe that we've come to a good negotiated point. And when it comes to using technology, as you suggest, the government will be driving that because, for example, my wife's a nurse, and the amount of paperwork that they are dealing with on a daily, weekly basis is unfair, and you're right that we can drive greater efficiency in that by using better computerised technology.
But if you've locked yourself into patient ratios, you're absolutely down the mine. You've killed it, and we'll have to send our patients offshore. It's a very it would have been a disaster.
When the details of the wage negotiation comes out for the nurses, maybe we can have a further conversation. We're not in a position to release the details yet because there's another couple of hurdles that need to go through. So we're preempting what the finer details are. But when you read those finer details, there have been productivity gains.
Apart from that, the talk about greater efficiency in the public service is basically code for sacking more public servants, isn't it?
We said at the budget update, which I brought down the 15th of December, that we would reduce the public service on a voluntary redundancy by 3,600. But that was a figure given to us by Treasury, and that means that no frontline services would be affected. What we're trying to do is to rid the public service of duplication. And I think it's one area where Wayne Swan and Julia Gillard need to focus their attention more on, and that is to be able to get great efficiencies in the public service, because there's no point the Victorian state government performing a role and the Commonwealth government public service performing the same role. And there's a significant saving to the taxpayers if there was greater focus on the savings of ridding the place of duplication and mismanagement.
Talking of things like that, will Victoria join with Western Australia and Queensland and introduce a uniform three-state occupation health and safety set of rules and regulations to overcome the Commonwealth's botched system?
Well, the OH&S system that was trying to be forced on us by the Commonwealth meant that we were going to burden Victorian business with more regulation and more bureaucracy. And we're aiming to do the exact opposite. And that's why we haven't signed up to the OH&S. Now next week we meet in Canberra, so I'll be meeting with Queensland, New South Wales, WA, obviously, and us as Victorians to be able to work through a number of those issues. But at the end of the day, we want a system that is fair when it comes to OH&S, but something that is going to work and work properly. You cannot have a system that is going to strangle, especially small business, in red tape.
You've pulled back from the Victoria-specific 20% carbon reduction target and have been accused of being climate change denialists. Can you explain the government's attitude towards climate change and what Victoria should or shouldn't be doing?
Well, the issue for us is that we have 500 years of brown coal. We have the second largest deposit of brown coal in the world after Russia. So it is a competitive advantage for us to use brown coal for power. And by having that cheaper power, we're able to be more competitive against other states and other parts of the world when it comes to manufacturing. So we are committed to continuing to use that brown coal. The reason why we ditched the target is that the Gillard government's bringing in this carbon tax as of the 1st of July, plus we had this 20%, so we're actually spending $2.2 billion on duplicating a target duplicating programs that were being implemented or supposedly being implemented by the carbon tax. So at the end of the day, we did an independent report, and that's why the target has been ditched. And we have said all along that we have grave reservations about the carbon tax and the impact it will have on the power supply here in Victoria, and in turn, the manufacturers. I mean, they rely so heavily on cheap, competitive power.
What are you going to do with the brown coal? Can you make it a clean brown coal, or are you just going to keep mining it as it is?
Well, we would love to, and I mean, we have a ETIS fund that's set up to look at those sorts of new technology, and surely, I have great faith in science and research that we're going to be able to find a system that will work, that at the end of the day that we can utilise that massive resource. Because as I said, we have 500 years of brown coal available to us. We know where it is, and to be able to spend the money in that area to be able to develop technology will be a great boost to this state and to other parts of the country.
Keep Point Henry going?
Look, we're in negotiations with Alcoa, so we're waiting on discussions both ways. I think they're happening in good faith. They are a very large supplier of, or they want user of power, so obviously that's going to play a big part in the negotiations. But let's just see how they play out. They're doing their own review. I think this has to be completed by the 30th of June, so we'll see how that goes. But we are working in good faith with them.
Kim, the government contributed towards the $270 million package for General Motors. Does that say anything about the broader view about assistance to manufacturing industry by the Baillieu government?
Well, we have said all along, I mean, there are 4 pillars to growing the economy and to creating jobs. First one is strong finances. Secondly is boosting productivity. Third is growing businesses, and that is by travelling into India and China. And the fourth, of course, is supporting industry and manufacturing. And it is an important part. The car industry here in Melbourne, the Ford, the Toyota and the Holdens, and we believe that we have achieved with the federal government a fair deal for the taxpayer and for underpinning those jobs. The part for us, which Premier Baillieu was pushing very hard, of course, was the issue of the supply chains, because you have to keep those supply chains going, because one job there means many other jobs in the economy, and that's so important. So the supply chain and making sure that that is underpinned to keep those jobs going at Holden were crucial for the state.
Thanks very much, Kim.
Thanks very much.